At long last, we are back with another edition of the Dallas Stars Fanatic Podcast. Garrett Jones and Ryan Lochead here with you. Ryan, it's so good to see you, my man. How was your off season?
Hey, it's good to see you too, man. It's been great, busy, fun, COVID free, and
Thank
hopefully
goodness.
that continues here.
Thank goodness. Yeah, seriously. Yeah, but it's hard to believe, but we're only 4.5 months removed from the 2021 because it was in one calendar year, right? All within January 13th to May 8th. That crazy marathon of a 56 game sprint. And here we are, the eve of opening night, and the Stars are ready to stack it up and do it again. I just can't believe it.
I know, I can't believe it either. For that 50 whatever game season felt like a mad dash. It's almost like
It
it
really
didn't
did.
happen. It's almost
It
like
really
no one
did.
made the playoffs last year.
It's like a fever dream, but as hard as it is to believe, Stars fans, there has been a whole year of separation between this season and the Stanley Cup run. That is just impossible to rectify in my head. I don't know about you, Ryan.
Yeah, really, the whole I don't know about everyone, but for me, and I think a large majority of people, the entire last 18 months has felt like this weird tunnel vision blur.
Right.
And that Stanley Cup run feels like a decade ago. So I'm
Right.
excited to get going with some fans in the building and see what our boys can do.
Right, absolutely. Should be a much better year for the Stars, obviously missing the playoffs last season. But we'll hit the highlights, talk about some of the major key acquisitions in the offseason. Obviously, some people walked out the door as well. Look at the regular season schedule, some interesting matchups for the Stars, talk about the line combinations, and finally offer our predictions, which we know have no chance of going completely wayward like we did last year, which about this time of year at the season relatively. So we'll be sure to offer those at the end and be sure to stick around for that. But one thing we did want to make sure that we get to, and it's a bit of a heavy subject. It almost feels strange doing a season opening podcast without our friend Connor Baird, who unfortunately lost his life in the off season. It's almost being impossible to rectify. I mean, that is very hard to wrap your head around. Connor was a great friend. Really integral part of the Dallas Stars Fanatic coverage on DallasSportsFanatic.com. He was actually the first Stars writer. He outlasted even me and Ryan too. And it's just hard to believe that he's gone. And we're of course want to respect his family's privacy, but Ryan, certainly hard to imagine moving forward in this podcast without him.
Yeah, anytime something like this happens in life, you gotta just pray for the family and hope, sending them all the positive vibes. I only met Connor once in real life, and he was just a joy to be around, ton of energy. And it was the first and only game, thanks to COVID, that I was able to photograph last season. And he was there as well. And he made it a cool experience, just having someone that's on the same team as you, kind of walking around, just kind of shooting the what and
Right.
getting comfortable. So he'll be missed. And like you said, we want to respect his family's privacy and just send them all the well wishes we possibly can, because that's a tough thing.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself. My fondest memory of Connor was getting to cover the 2020 Winter Classic with him. And I'm so glad that, his life that was ultimately cut short, that he got to see that moment and see it in person. And I feel very honored that I got to be at his side for that, because we had a lot of fun just experiencing that. I'll never forget navigating the huge swath of people at the Cotton Bowl that day to get through to the media section, and him and I trying to bring that. He just kind of brushed it off of his shoulder. I was a little more, upset and a little more impacted by just those huge crowds, but he was just very calm and very cool. And I think that's kind of a microcosm of his personality. So you said it best. He certainly will be missed. Glad to see that he got to see the Stars win a Stanley Cup in his lifetime. Glad he got to see them go back and make another run of the Cup and ultimately get to see them play in a cool environment like that. And it's just a reminder, never take a single day, or in our case, a game, for granted, right? Just because you never know when life can be ended. So we want to wish Connor and his family very well, and so thankful for everything that he did as part of our coverage. On a much lighter note, we have a new day starting tomorrow, right? A new season. Stars at the Rangers, 6:00 puck drop at MSG. Ryan, just getting into kind of the general expectations of the season. How do you feel going into 21-22?
Hard to not feel optimistic, because it seems like we have a bunch of guys that we didn't have last season back on the full-time roster, and guys that were sorely missed because they were our top guys. So even if there's criticisms about their production numbers at times, that leadership and that personality in the locker room goes further than any tangible statistics. So I'm really looking forward to the year. I think the players are looking forward to it, obviously, even more, because they seem like a team that has a lot to prove. And more specifically, some individuals have some things to prove as well. So it's going to be one of those real gritty kind of chip on your shoulder seasons.
Right.
That's the best kind of hockey.
Right. And to be fair, the Stars had a lot of that last year too, right? They went through so many injuries, right? Because they're a very physical team, and a lot of that is going to result in a lot of injuries. They have a really aggressive back check. And because of that, right, you're oftentimes going to find yourself a little more banged up than not. And I like what you said there about the gritty, kind of hard-nosed style of this team. I'll be curious to see if they kind of reel that back at the beginning of the season, right? Because they spent so much time last year without Radulov, without Tyler Seguin, without some key pieces. And really, if this group has Seguin and Radulov together, especially Radulov, who in his brief time last year was just excellent on the ice, you definitely think that Dallas makes up the margin where they fell 5 points behind to Nashville and ultimately gets that first-round shot against Carolina last year.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there in the same camp you are with that. Guys like Radulov and Seguin are the lifeblood of the team, and
Right.
the emphasis is going to go to Radulov because of how good he looks out there when he's out there, and how he just has that innate ability to score goals and big-time goals and bring energy. So I'm sure they're going to dial back the physicality a little bit and try to get back to their goal-scoring roots here.
Yeah,
I'm dying to see it.
Oh, same here. And speaking of dying to see it, I cannot wait to see Tyler Seguin back on the ice. I think if you're a Stars fan, first off, stop what you're doing. If you're a Stars fan, if you haven't seen it, go on Tyler Seguin's Instagram, go back a couple months and watch his injury rehab recovery. Have you seen this video, Ryan?
Yeah, I have.
It was incredible. We knew that he was banged up after the Stanley Cup, right? He gave it everything that he got. He clearly was not himself. I think he got some unfair criticism from Stars fans just because he wasn't playing to the ability that we know that he can play in the Stanley Cup final. Turns out he had a torn hip labrum, a multitude of other issues, and was skating through it, which is just hard to wrap your head around. I don't think even that really provided a window into how serious his injuries were until you go and watch this video of him recovering from that. He had surgeries. He had all kinds of extra frames and stuff like that to help him recover, help his bone set. He was in a wheelchair, for crying out loud, for portions of the beginning of the season, and he still came back and played in a handful of games in the Stars' last week of the season. Darn near almost helped the team to a playoff push. If you have any questions about Tyler Seguin and how much he's buying into this franchise and whether he wants to win the Stanley Cup here in Dallas, just go watch that video, Ryan, because he absolutely is going to be a force this season.
I don't know if you know this, but you need healthy hips to skate at an effective NHL level. And the fact that he was out there, and he does get a lot of that criticism because he is a star and he's supposed to be scoring goals and he makes a lot of money. And so it's an easy kind of throw, kind of a cheap throw when people do that. And I think it's an unfair criticism. You'd like to see him score more, but he's got a torn hip and he's going through all sorts of stuff. So you hate when people get hurt and you don't want anyone ever to have to go through that kind of rehab. But the fact that he did, and the fact that he was trying to play every day, that kind of mentality, like, I got to get back out there. That's the kind of stuff you want on the team. And that's a leader. And I'm excited to see it as well. I recently read a tweet from him. It was a tweet or just a quote. I can't really remember, but he basically said that he was at his house laying down after a long, hard week of training camp. And he was like, wait, I don't feel any pain right. And that was kind of an eye-opening thing, just to kind of build on what you said about how hurt this guy actually was and how much pain he was in on a day basis, just how much he had to go through. I mean, he was, like you said, in a wheelchair, laying on the couch with a big old thing on his leg, not moving, not playing golf, not doing all those kind of mentally recreating things you do off the ice to get you ready to get on the ice. So there's a lot that goes into getting hurt. And when you're hurt at that level, it's hard to produce and it's hard to kind of deal with that, especially when your job is to go score goals. So I think it's going to come out and have one of those, screw the haters. We're going to show you why I make $10 billion a year. We're going to make a serious run at this thing and it's going to be on my back.
Right. Yeah. Right now I'm sporting for our listening audience, I'm sporting the Joe Pavelski road jersey with the A patch on it. And I really hope that Tyler Seguin earns an A patch on his sweater this year, because that kind of effort proves it. There's been some question as to his leadership. He's had the patch before. Not that the patch means a lot, but obviously the alternate captain designation is the purpose there. He's had it before, had it taken away. I think that he deserves to have it and keep it back, because really, I mean, there's no better demonstration of leadership than what he went through. So, yeah, absolutely. Totally agree with what you had to say there, and really looking forward to what he does in 21-22. Also talking about what returns, we cannot talk about last year without talking about Jason Robertson. Basically any other year than last year's important season with Kirill Kaprizov. He wins the Calder Trophy, ends up finishing second in the voting. Still something I think Star fans are really excited about. What do you expect from J-Rob this year?
Well, first off, not to take anything away from Kaprizov, but this man is not a rookie. Let's just put that out there. He's played pro hockey all over the dang world, but I get it. He's a rookie in the NHL, so that's what happens. But right. J-Rob was a surprise to me. I did not see that coming at all. I'm on record criticizing him a little bit in the early days, thinking he was slow. But guess what? He proved me and a lot of people wrong, and he looked incredible out there. His style of play is perfect for this team. And I mean, I expect it to just build. Those kind of things aren't just flukes. And, you know, when you get a taste of that kind of thing, the great athletes kind of down on that. And it'll be good to see him with some big names next to him and see what they can create together. So the young goal scorers is something the Stars have kind of been lacking on an offensive front here. So I hope that he can continue, and I'm definitely in his camp these days. So
yeah. 17 goals, 29 assists, 46 points in just 54 games. Very close to a point per game player and a 13 plus minus, most importantly, there in the 2021 season. And that was with a short stint in the AHL. Like, he went down to Texas in the AHL in early February, came back up very quickly because the Stars were so injured and had COVID situations, and then basically took off from there. And he found himself skating on the top line, which you mentioned, Ryan. I think Dallas, based off what we saw last year, just looking at what we saw in the 2021 season, you look at him on the left wing, Roope Hintz at the center position, and then Joe Pavelski, who darn near, if he were on a playoff team, probably would have been in discussion for the Hart Trophy for how he played last season. That is, I'd stack that line against any other top 10 line in hockey.
They've got it all, you know. They've got two real young gun scorers, and they got a leader who's, you know, showing everybody that he ain't done yet. Pavelski, I love that guy. He's going to show up before anybody. He's going to leave after everyone, and he's going to do it day in and day out. And that's how he's always been. And that kind of leadership is not, you know, forgotten on this team. Right. So yeah, like you said, I'll stack that lineup against anyone in the league, and we're going to this year. I expect them to get a lot of first line looks.
Yeah, Pavelski's getting closer to 40, but I think I speak for
a new age, man. We got Tom Brady throwing touchdowns in the NFL.
Exactly. It's obviously a very different game, but I think I speak for a lot of Stars fans when there's going to be kind of a bit of a nervous anticipation watching him playing this year, because he is entering the final year of his contract. It was 3 years, $21 million a couple off seasons ago. And there were a lot of fans who criticized the heck out of that deal. Now it's looking like a value deal based off his production last year. Obviously, things can change going into this season, but that certainly is going to be interesting to see whether Dallas decides to extend him within the season or let him hit free agency. I would imagine the latter probably happens, but definitely something to keep an eye on. And by the way, we were talking about the top line. The second line for Dallas, I would also stack up against any second line in hockey. When you've got a guy like Jamie Benn, Tyler Seguin, and Alexander Radulov, you know, that's been Dallas's core three basically since 2017. And just the fact that you can move them from the first line like they've skated on for 3 years down to the second is just really a good look into this team's depth.
It really is. And, man, it's so good to hear those three names tied together, because we were robbed of it last season. So, you know, the Jamie, Tyler, Rads, they're three guys who have been here and done it. And they've nearly tasted that glory. And I'm sure more than anybody else on that roster, they're hungry, because they can probably – maybe Jamie and everybody else, but they can see that twilight area on their career coming, and they're going to want to get this thing done. And we got a good team for it this year.
Yeah, they absolutely do. And then taking a look at the defense, obviously anchored by Miro Heiskanen. He'll be great on the power play once more. I think looking for a little more offense than we saw coming in last year. Esa Lindell obviously took a lot of good steps forward. Just looking at guys who return right now, John Klingberg was dangled in trade discussions. They were kind of offhand rumors, to be fair, but there was some kind of rumors that were flying around of a possible deal with Columbus with Seth Jones. I think I speak for a lot of Stars fans when I say I'm so glad that that deal didn't happen. Klinger has been the heart and soul of the Dallas defense for the past couple of years. It's going to be really good seeing Heiskanen skating in the first pairing and Klingberg back again in the second pairing this year.
Yeah, great 1-2 punch. Those rumors were annoying to me. I was really hoping that did not happen, and it didn't. We got Klinger back in Dallas, and that's a huge deal for us. He looks good out there too. He's a new father as well, so he probably has some awesome new perspective.
Yeah, glad you brought that up too. And by the way, I would like to think that Jim Nill wouldn't have given Seth Jones the deal that he got in Chicago, but I'm so glad that Dallas does not have to go down that path. Even though, Seth is Popeye Jones' son from Dallas, very cool story there, but man, I'm glad that Dallas stayed away from that as well. Okay, looking at the newcomers, right? It was a big offseason, and since we're on the defenseman, let's start there. Ryan Suter signs a 3-year deal, a long-term, but a very doable average annual value. Your thoughts on that deal?
Suter, he's been good up there in Minnesota. I'm not too familiar with this game, to be honest with you, but he's a name that you around the NHL for quite some time. He was with Minnesota forever, so hopefully he can bring some of that veteran experience downtown here and kind of provide that. I don't know, that just something, I guess. I don't really know too much about Suter. I'll be honest with you right now.
Right. Well, he's 36. He's born in Madison, Wisconsin. So that instantly is a very underrated part of this deal. He and Joe Pavelski are friends and have been friends for a very long time. So that gives Dallas's clubhouse an instant chemistry boost. Suter's also been a captain in his brief time in Minnesota, relatively brief time in Minnesota. Was one of Nashville's team leaders, and then actually departed in a very infamous deal in the 2011 offseason when he and Zach Parise both signed 13-year contracts. And both Minnesota, if you don't know, bought both of them out of those contracts this offseason. So I thought it was very resourceful by Jim Nill to get all over signing him. By the way, you mentioned his longevity. When he skates in the second game of the season, it will be his 1,200th in the NHL. He's also got 93 goals to his name, which is pretty strong for a defenseman on the back end. 514 points, 514 assists, I should say, 607 points, a plus minus of 105. Last year, he actually had a really good season on a strong Minnesota team. 3 goals, 16 assists, 19 points. But here's the kicker. A +9 plus minus. That was the first time that he was in the green side, in the plus side, for the first time in 3 seasons. So it goes to show you that, you might have, plateaued there for a while in Minnesota, but Dallas is getting him when his game could be swinging on the upward end. So, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. See, I didn't know that about the Pavelski Suter relationship there. That's a big deal. That's underrated there. So Suter's going to be showing up early, just like Pavelski is, and they're going to have a nice long season together. That's awesome.
I think and we talked just a couple minutes ago about whether Dallas wants to bring back Pavelski. If he has a year like he had last year, he's going to command a lot on the free agent market. Maybe having a guy like him around. Obviously, he's got a ton of chemistry with Ben Sagan and Radulov and the like. Maybe having Suter around is a reason why Pavelski might want to re-sign, give Dallas a hometown discount. This is something that we as fans and podcast hosts can look into a lot. It probably doesn't make as much as an impact in the front office, but you mentioned it is worth taking at least a look at. So Ryan Suter signs with the Stars 3 years, very friendly average annual value, making less than $10 million total. So I think that really helps Dallas as far as cap flexibility, which they took some and used to address the situation in net, which has gotten
that's an understatement.
Very, very interesting, to say the least. So Anton Khudobin is back. He signed back with Dallas in the 2021 offseason after just carrying the Stars to the Stanley Cup final. He played probably over his head in that run, as we kind of saw in the regular season last year, but certainly a serviceable goaltender, and he fits so well in Dallas. So he is back. But Jim Nill actually chose to address the goalie situation by signing a familiar name. You might know Braden Holtby. from the Washington Capitals, was a huge part of those playoff teams in the 2010s, early 2010s, and won a Stanley Cup with Washington in 2018. So that's a big name to address. Jake Ottinger, after a really strong rookie season, was one of the top rookie goalies in the NHL, but still a first-year player, very unseasoned, a first-round pick a couple years ago. He's going to start his season in the AHL. Just your general thoughts to that crazy goalie carousel.
Yeah, I was going to use that exact words. It does seem like a crazy carousel out there. The Stars seem to be a squad that loves to collect these veteran pieces, and then Holtby's our latest shiny nickel or whatever. I think Doby is a perfect second option. He's a great second punch. He's definitely not a franchise guy, not a guy you want in net all the time. So obviously that's been recognized by management, and we're going to put some guys out there. And we're going to see who has the hot hand and who plays the best.
Right.
I think Holtby is a great kind of waiting piece there, because I'm obviously not in the Stars front office, but I would imagine they want Jake to play really well in the AHL and eventually make his way up. And I know that he has those aspirations as well. So, hopefully he plays well down there, and we'll see a lot of him this season. But until then, I believe in Holtby. He won a Stanley Cup. He's looked good in the preseason. He looks good in practice. Like, that's not a bad name to have, especially when the goalie position has been so shaky for a few years here for one reason or another.
Right. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And, Ottinger definitely looked like he could hold his own last year in the shortened season, right? He's a kid who made his debut in a Stanley Cup final game, for crying out loud. Like, he can handle pressure, and he can handle playing in the NHL. But I agree with you in that the Stars front office just kind of wants to get him some more seasoning before bringing him up as a legit number 2 goalie. I completely agree with you there. And the 1-year term for Braden Holtby obviously lends a lot of credence to that they're looking at him for 2022. But injuries happen, right? And we could very well see Ottinger up for a significant amount of time in the regular season. Kind of speaking of that, it is worth addressing. Yes, Ben Bishop is still on the roster. And I mean, what a guy. Like, if you haven't heard the story about Ben Bishop's offseason as a Stars fan, I encourage you to check it out. He committed himself to long-term IR. He could have requested a trade, could have took the Stars to court, could have forced a lot of drama there. But he accepted the assignment on long-term IR, which will help Dallas stay within the salary cap. And hopefully for him, it looks like some kind of a career return is up in the air. Hopefully for his sake, he gets back to the ice one day. But as we mentioned, Dallas is moving forward in the goaltending situation as if Bishop's not going to play this year and beyond.
Yeah, you hate to see injuries kind of derail a guy for so long, but it's good that he has that perspective, and he must love living here in Dallas and has found a nice, comfortable life to pull a move like that. So, wish him all the best, and hopefully we see him on the ice sometime, but it clearly won't be anytime soon.
Right, so. And it's been a long time. We were talking about how long it felt ago since the Stars had the bubble run back in September of 20. That was the last time we saw Ben Bishop on the ice. And he played, 4 games in the playoff run? It was almost solely Anton Khudobin with Ottinger coming on and a couple of relief appearances. That's been the last time we saw Ben Bishop on the ice. We did not see him at all last year. It was Anton Khudobin, Jake Ottinger, and then a little bit of Landon Bowe splashed in between there. But Ben Bishop was nowhere to be found. And, I think it's more of a wait-and-see things for the Stars, and it's more of an if, less than a win. We see him return to the ice. But, at the end of the day, that trade with LA back in 2017 absolutely worked in the Stars' favor. They make that deal trying to address the shaky goaltending after Kari Lehtinen and the Antti Niemi era. And I think that absolutely was a success, because that was Dallas's shakiest aspect after that 2016 run. And you look at getting to the 2019 second round against St. Louis. You look at him at least helping you get through that 2019-20 season and find themselves in a playoff. So Ben Bishop was a big part of that. So that deal overall by Jim Nill is an A for me.
Yeah, I'm right there. I'm right there with you. We had some good memories with Ben and some games that we surely would have lost for another goalie. One that sticks out in my brain is that 50 save performance back in in that Blues series. Yep. Ultimately didn't work out for us, but man, that was a game. That was a game where one Jamie Benn wraparound from getting there. So.
Yeah, and the Stanley Cup run a year later certainly softens the blow of that a little bit, but you look at that in St. Louis's path to the Stanley Cup, that very could easily be one that Dallas is lifting in 2019 if that goal goes. I absolutely agree with you there.
Game of inches.
Yep, it absolutely is, just like football. Taking a look at some of the other newcomers, Luke Glendening signed over from Detroit. I'm curious, Ryan, have you seen any of his work in Detroit?
You're gonna have to do this one. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I was just kicking it out there. So Dallas loses Andrew Cogliano to San Jose, 1 year, $1 million deal. And they basically bring back an Andrew Cogliano clone in Glendening. He's very good on the penalty kill. Cogliano is obviously one of the fastest players in the NHL, so Dallas will certainly miss his speed. But actually, Glendening, when you look at some of the advanced metrics, he might be a better penalty killer than Andrew Cogliano. So I'm very curious to see how he skates. Again, a bottom six player, not really going to make that big of an impact overall, but he is in Dallas's projected lineups coming into the season. So I'm very curious to see him. How about Michael Raffl? You familiar with Michael Raffl's work?
We'll touch on Glendening a little bit. Yeah. You need those guys on the team. Those guys that are going to chase pucks down, back check until their legs fall off. Those kind of guys. So, looking at his stats here, they're not great, but they're not bad either. It's just a nice, role player on the squad and
another veteran.
Another veteran, and you can't have enough veterans on the team. So
yeah. And then the last guy projected to make Dallas's lineup as a new pickup is Yanni Hockenpaw, who, if you watch the Carolina Hurricanes, great name, absolutely. If you watch the Carolina Hurricanes in the playoffs the past couple seasons, he's a guy who just constantly has his name called. He's constantly finding the puck. Really good puck moving defenseman from the back line. He'll kind of skate into the bottom pairing along with Andrej Sekera, but I like what Dallas is doing there, pairing a young player with a veteran defenseman, kind of what they're doing on all three pairings. The projected top six for Dallas on the defensive side is Miro Heiskanen and Esa Lindell. So you got two young players there. Then you got the veteran Suter paired with a kind of a guy who's in the middle of his career with John Klingberg. Then you got Sekera paired with Hockenpaw. I like what Dallas is doing there with their defensive pairings.
I just can't get over this name, Hockenpaw. I'm going to enjoy hearing Razor say that thing. I hope he scores a bunch so we can get some. There's going to be all sorts of wordsmith combinations coming from Razor with that one.
Yeah.
Hockenpaw.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that all day.
Yeah, and he is, I want to say he's Finnish as well. So
all the Finns. We love veterans and we love Finns on our team. That's our brand identity.
Absolutely. So he probably will get along very well with Lindell, Klingberg, and the like, and of course Rope Hintz as well. So that should be very interesting to see the way that he kind of fits in. I really like what Dallas did overall in the offseason.
I think so too. I agree. I'm just happy to have these healthy guys back, man.
Right. The only thing I think I wanted Dallas to do, but they didn't, and looking back, I'm very glad that they didn't, was sign Blake Coleman, who has had a lot of very good success against Dallas in the Stanley Cup final, obviously in the regular season. He's a Dallas native. I thought that pairing worked really well. Yes, but he was massively overpaid by Calgary. So again, Dallas doesn't get Seth Jones. They don't get Blake Coleman, but I think first off, they dodged the bullet on those two deals with how much those two players got paid, and then also had a very resourceful offseason overall.
Yeah, for a team that gets criticized for having a couple guys that fans seem to think are overpaid at times, we definitely didn't need to add a couple more overpaid guys. That would have been a very, very annoying season, especially if they don't work out.
Absolutely. Yeah, so that about wraps up the Stars offseason looking ahead at the 2021 season. We talked about Robertson. We talked about the other top liners. Let's get into our predictions for this season. Dallas is back in the Central Division, the division that we all know and love. It's not the weird whack Central Division with the Florida Panthers and the Detroit Red Wings.
Those guys out of here.
I know. And you look at like an 82 game season, you think, okay, Dallas probably would have had a much better chance this season going in with that division than they did last year when they were so injured and it was a shortened season and whatnot. So honestly, I'm glad to put that weird fever dream behind us. I don't like them by any means, but I'm glad to see the Chicago Blackhawks, the Nashville Predators, the St. Louis Blues, the teams that we all know and hate in the Central. And of course, the Minnesota Wild. I think Dallas actually got a really good deal last year not playing them because that Minnesota team was great. But they figure back into the playoff picture. I'm curious your general predictions and the ceiling for the Stars in the Central this year.
The Central comes with its good and its bad. We have to play a team called the Colorado Avalanche a bunch, who are coming into the season as the Stanley Cup favorite according to DraftKings here. But I think we're going to have the kind of season that puts us right there in the mix for one of those playoff spots. It's safe to say Avalanche will probably run away with it. I don't think anybody would disagree, not run away with it, but they're going to win the division. That's my prediction, and I think a lot of people's predictions, a safe prediction. But from there, it's kind of just like a dice throw. There's a couple good hockey teams that are going to battle night in, night out to make themselves relevant and get themselves in the playoffs. Including those Chicago Blackhawks that you mentioned. That team is my little sleeper pick.
Yeah,
I think that they're going to be a little bit better than they have been. So we're going to see them. And those pesky St. Louis Blues, man, they always seem to stick around. But if we're making predictions, I think the Stars fall somewhere between that second, third, and fourth spot in the division. I know that's kind of not the craziest of take, but they're a good team that will depend on injury luck and battling night in and night out, and hopefully that goalie situation kind of solidifies itself and we can make a run here. I'm excited to see it.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. The Central is very interesting the way it stacks up. There's only one team that is going to be at the bottom in what is now an 18 division. By the way, if you're an old-fashioned Stars fan, you remember when the team played in the Pacific, you remember staying up late to watch the team play in San Jose, at Arizona, and whatnot. Well, you're going to have a little bit of that back in your life because the Arizona Coyotes, Kachina and all, have re-entered the Central Division with the expansion of the Seattle Kraken. They are the only team that is a lock at the bottom of the division, right? They are actively not trying to win. They have a mind-bending amount of issues. So obviously when it comes to their arena, obviously like a terrible GM run with John Chaika, who's being investigated by the league. They traded Alvin Ekman-Larsson. They traded Connor Garland. Like they are the one team that is locked at 8. But after that, it is really anybody's guess. You could see St. Louis as low as 7. Could see Chicago at 7. You could see Nashville at 7. But I agree with you there that it's going to be a hodgepodge between 1 and 7. I think Winnipeg, if anything, kind of is a team that I've got huge question marks around. They're going to miss Mark Scheifele to start the year. So that could be interesting. Chicago, you mentioned, I like what they did overall. They brought in Marc-Andre Fleury. They brought in Seth Jones. So that could be interesting as well. Colorado figures as the division favorite. So you kind of, pencil them in at number 1 for now. I think Minnesota probably shapes up in that second spot. So all that to say for Dallas, right? You're somewhere in there, just like you said, Ryan, 3, 4, 5. I think that 2 is probably the max ceiling for this team. I don't see them chasing Colorado down one way or the other. But yeah, I totally agree with you there. Dallas certainly can expect to find itself somewhere in the middle of the pack there in the Central.
Yeah, I think you said it well there. Those poor Coyotes. Get Phil Kessel out of there. He deserves better.
Yeah, no, I mean, he is going to be their guy. Like, I do not see how they score goals this season without him. Really, I mean, that he might be a deadline acquisition for anybody, but that could certainly be interesting. Then taking a look at the Pacific, the Vegas Golden Knights, by many considered Stanley Cup or bust, obviously lost to Colorado. They topped Colorado and ultimately lost to Montreal last year in another whack matchup within that weird 2021 season. Your thoughts kind of on how the Pacific shapes up, especially now with the addition of the Seattle Kraken?
I love the Kraken, man. I love the name. I love the
We
logo.
saw them take the ice for the first time last night.
They lost last night, but I like them. Can you start this off real quick? I'm having some internet trouble over here.
Yeah, no. It's an interesting division for sure. Obviously, Vegas favored to win it. There's a lot more at the bottom in this division for sure than there is in the Central and the Western Conference. The Ducks, also one of those teams that's not trying to win. The Kings are much improved, but they probably won't figure into the playoffs this season. And then the Sharks and Canucks both had disastrous 2021 campaigns. So those 4 you can pretty much pencil at the bottom. Some people are picking the Kraken to kind of sneak into the playoffs. I don't see that. I don't think that they have enough scoring. I think that's going to be a big issue for them. We saw last night that their specialists are actually pretty good on both the power play and the penalty kill. And then Phil Grubauer, you don't have to tell Stars fans twice. You know how important he is. You go back to that 2020 playoff series against the Avs. Colorado loses him in net and everything changes. So that's a team that can be carried by its back end and goaltending for sure. I still have them on the outside looking in the playoffs. And then some combination of the Oilers, Flames, and Golden Knights 1 through 3, obviously with Vegas heavily favored to win that division, is probably how things are going to shape up there.
Yeah, I think that Seattle kind of prediction for people is probably a little Las Vegas Knights hangover since they were so successful right after their expansion. But they're not the worst team in the division, so there's definitely a chance. What I want to happen, what I hope happens, is that we see a little bit more from those Edmonton Oilers and poor Connor McDavid, who deserves so much better than he's getting up there. You always want the best play. At least I always want those best players to kind of perform on the biggest stages. So I hope he's up there. And I know they'll make the playoffs most likely, but I want to see them win a series or two, mainly because I'm tired of the Las Vegas Knights.
Right. Absolutely. I think you had this a common sentiment between Western Conference fans for sure. And I think a lot of people really, one of the reasons why a lot of people kind of rallied around Dallas in 2020 was because they took down what ended up being a very arrogant Vegas team in that brief Stanley Cup Finals run. So that's absolutely something that's interesting. By the way, we talked about the Seattle Kraken. If you want to see the Stars take on the Kraken for the first time at the American Airlines Center, January 12th, that's a Wednesday night. So circle that in your calendars if you want to go see the expansion team come through Dallas for the first time. And then they match up in Seattle for the first time in March, I believe. So that could be interesting. Very quickly through the Eastern Conference, Dallas obviously won't see these teams but twice a year. In the Atlantic, very interesting there. They did have the Eastern Conference finalists in Montreal. Again, that was the last team to make the playoffs. Toronto knocked out in the first round. Tampa Bay, the Stanley Cup champions in the Atlantic Division, which is very strange to think that you have two Stanley Cup finalists within the same division, but just go with it. It was last year. Just roll with it.
It didn't happen. Last year was a dream.
Buffalo, obviously, at the bottom of that division. Boston is a huge question mark without Tuukka Rask. Florida had a great season, but again, bounced in the first round. Your thoughts on that division?
Yeah, it was interesting seeing seeing Tampa Bay out there last night. I'm glad they got the opening L because, they've won enough. But, Boston's going to be a question mark without that Tuukka Rask fella, but they always seem to be good no matter what. They're the city of champions, which stinks. So we'll see how that shapes up. Buffalo's got a lot of question marks. Obviously, they're pretty they're battling with their best player, so that's never good.
Right.
Montreal made a deep run. We'll see again. The team my favorite in the Atlantic Division is going to be the Toronto Maple Leafs because they have so much talent. Austin Matthews, U.S. guy, and they just never live up to that expectation. Hopefully they can climb over the hump at some point here because, like I said, with McDavid, you want to see the best guys on the ice when it matters most.
Right. Then the Metro is much more wide open. Pittsburgh got out to a great start. They beat Tampa Bay on the road. It's obviously a regular season game, but that's a great way to start the season for the Penguins after a disappointing first-round exit. Carolina is a real dark horse in that division as well. And then the Flyers, Capitals, and Hurricanes, as I mentioned, figure to be the playoff teams there. That division has a lot at the bottom of it as well. You cannot sleep on the New York Islanders, though. They were very close to making a Stanley Cup final appearance the past two seasons. I've got them picked to win that division as well. But again, there's a lot of stuff at the bottom here in this division with New Jersey and Columbus.
Right. My pick the same as the New York Islanders. They're a gritty bunch, and they almost made it the last 2 years. So I'm looking for them to continue and hopefully grab that success. That's a fan base right there. They're a lot of fun to watch. They get loud. Right. New stadium though. It's different. It's not on top of you, but I'm sure they'll be just as loud.
Yeah, it certainly will be. And kind of transitioning back to the Stars and offering some predictions for this group, bringing it back to this division. Dallas actually, for the first time in what I can ever remember as a fan, opens on the road on an East Coast swing. They'll be playing a lot of teams from this division. They start out at the New York Rangers on October 14th. That's tomorrow night, the time we're recording. Then they stop through Boston, at Ottawa, and then at Pittsburgh for a 4-game home road stretch, I should say. What do you think about that to start the year for Dallas?
I don't love starting away like that. It's not my favorite thing. When I was kind of typing in the schedule into my calendar, I was getting a little shook how far it was till I was allowed to email the Stars and beg them to let me take photographs. So don't love that. I think it's a fine matchup though. don't expect the Rangers to give us too much trouble. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. Yeah. It's hard to say in preseason, but we're in the business of making predictions. So I think the Stars get it done. Early win, early couple wins on this East Coast swing, and they roll into the AC pumped up, jacked up, and eagerly, ready to perform in front of American Airlines Center's finest fans.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. The home opener on October 22nd, that's a Friday night against LA, so that'll be a really good crowd. I think on that 4-game, road stretch, if you pick up a point against New York, Boston, and Pittsburgh, that's pretty strong. That's 3 points right there. And obviously Ottawa is another one of those teams that's not really trying to win. So you got to get 2 points there on the road. You start with 5 points in 4 games. That's totally fine by me. You do want to avoid the overtime loss because, oh my goodness, last year Dallas, so many overtime losses just because they were so banged up, had to give it all they had in 60 minutes. And then by the time overtime and shootouts rolled around, they were absolutely spent. So hopefully we see less of that this year. It would be kind of funny to see Dallas start out with 3 overtime regulation losses. Maybe one of those can go your way, but I certainly agree with you. If you get points in 3 out of 4 on that first swing, that's a great start to the season. As far as on the ice, though, who is your prediction for Dallas's top point scorer this year?
It's got to be my guy. I got to ride with Tyler Seguin this year. There's no reason not to pick him. He's fully healthy. He's the best player on the team. And I expect him to show out here because he's nowhere near done in his career. I think a lot of people have written him off. And I think he changes a lot of minds this year.
Right. Absolutely. I think that's a great prediction. I'm going to go with a guy that's a little more of a wild card. This guy was unstoppable when he was on the ice. That was the problem, was keeping him there last year. And that was Rope Hintz. He's going to skate in the top line, be the first centerman on the ice for Dallas. I think that he's going to have a monster year. I mean, I really do, because it seemed like he was completely unstoppable when he was actually playing. But that was the problem. It was 1 game on, 1 game off with him, maybe 2 games on and then 2 games off last year. He only ended up skating in just about half of the contests in the 2021 season. So if Dallas can keep Rope Hintz on the ice, I think it could be a breakout all-star caliber campaign for him for sure. Obviously, keep an eye on Pavelski, and then our guy Jason Robertson will certainly put up points in that first line. Maybe look for a sophomore slump, I should say, from him. Hopefully not, at least a slow start. That unfortunately it could be in the cards. Just because of the, as we mentioned earlier, almost point per game pace that he was playing at early in the season. But other than that, I expect big things out of him as well. On the goaltender side of the question, something we were talking about earlier is going to be very interesting. Who makes the most starts in net for the Stars?
It's got to be split between Holtby and Dobby for me. I think that's the blueprint. I think that's what the management wants. I don't think they're going to bring Ottinger up very often unless they need for it. I think they want him to get his reps in, to face a lot of shots and and make a lot of mistakes down there, so he's ready to come up to the next level. So I think we'll see some sort of like hybrid split combo like we saw with Ben Bishop and Dobby there toward the end. So that's my prediction on that one. But to backtrack on Hintz real quick, just wanted to say that guy's a wreck. And he just goes. And when he goes, it's there's good things at the end of that. It's a joy to watch.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. A lot of good points there. Moving on, I'll offer my thoughts on the goaltending situation for sure. I do think that they're definitely going to try to platoon with Holtby and Hudobin, and I think that works very well because I think both those players at this point in their career are more than willing to accept that role, right?
Absolutely.
And in a normal season like this, you're going to have a lot of back-to-backs. I think that works very well with this because there's no pressure for Dallas to send out the number 1 guy just to say, oh, we need our best goaltender on the ice. Well, you don't really have one. Going into the season, you don't have that guy who's the designated number 1 goalie. You've got a 1A and 1B type situation. So I think that chemistry and that kind of game plan for the Stars and the coaching staff under Rick Bowness, who we actually haven't mentioned at all in this episode, but again, back for his second year in the full-time designation, I think that they can work them very well in that rotation. So I certainly agree with you there.
And I think Dobby is the kind of goalie. I think Dobby's the kind of goalie that I think he enjoys that 1B role. I don't think at this point he's looking for like that kind of like I'm the guy. I want to be out there every.
He had that. He had that in the Stanley Cup run. He had
Yeah,
that
and
in him for
he
sure.
performed well, and it just seems to be his
Right.
personality where he kind of loves being on the bench sometimes. He loves getting the guys going in the locker room. He brings a lot of energy. He's funny.
Right.
He knows his role and he likes it. And I don't think that role, he's as successful in that kind of role with
Right.
that full-time load and the stress that kind of comes with that. So I'm sure he's a happy guy here in Dallas, and we're going to see a lot of good things from him. His style of play is set up for like consistent. Like he's like the no pun intended there. The anti Jake Ottinger, where Ottinger is so like upright and positional and will just make all the right moves, but he's not going to do anything crazy. Whereas Dobby's going to flop around like a fish and try to hit the puck out of who knows where. So eventually, hopefully in Dallas, we see that 1-2 punch, but hopefully it'll be a nice placeholder for us till then.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. One thing that I didn't really have this scheduled in our conversation, but it kind of came up naturally. Again, I mentioned Rick Bowness coming back for his second full season. Obviously, the league's oldest head coach. It's kind of a year-by-year thing with he and Jim Nill, right? Basically, he's got the job for as long as he wants it, at least for now. Last year, they did take a step back. They were the first Stanley Cup finalists not to make the playoffs the season after since the Kings in 2015. So that's an interesting little mark. And kind of shows how rare it is. But again, you got the COVID season, injuries, a lot of things against him this year. Do you feel like the pressure's on him this year to take a step forward and get the team to the playoffs as far as job security?
It has to be, right? Because he gets the job after a crazy Stanley Cup run. We missed it last year. And there was a lot of question marks around that signing. Some people thought we should go a different direction, and we ultimately stayed with him. So I think there's definitely that underlying pressure, even though no one will ever admit it. It's got to be there.
Right.
Playoffs are on us. Can't miss it years in a row, especially with the group we have coming back.
Exactly. Yeah, I completely agree with you there. And something I'm just dying for as a Stars fan is some kind of stability behind the bench, right? I mean, when you look at the past 2 decades, this team has not had that. You look at any era, and there's been a lot of success, especially in the past decade. There's been a lot of success through the playoffs. That has not been anything that Dallas has had as a consistent head coach. And really, you look at the guy who it was going to be, it was Jim Montgomery. He would still be in Dallas if he didn't have his personal problems off the ice. Fortunately, he's been able to kind of rectify that and get his career back on a positive trajectory as an assistant coach with the Blues within the division. And he certainly figures if he can keep it on the straight and narrow to get a head coaching job one day. It's not going to be Dallas. Possibly not. I mean, we did see Alex Cora return to the Boston Red Sox, obviously a different sport, but there is a precedent for something like that. But I digress, right? It's likely not going to happen in Dallas, but I completely agree with you. I think myself and a lot of Stars fans are kind of starved for that consistency behind the bench. And we don't know, just because of how old he is, right? That's not going to happen with Rick Bowness.
Yeah, you need that coaching consistency. It's the most important job in the franchise, in my opinion. It's the guy who sets the tone day in and day out. It's an atmosphere that he's solely or she is solely responsible for creating there. And without that consistency, you kind of get this weird kind of we'll use the word carousel again over the years. And I like Rick Bowness. I hope he makes the playoffs and hope he can provide some consistency. And maybe over in a perfect world, the next few years we see him bring in kind of groom a new assistant to kind of maybe take over his job. But that's in a perfect world. I'm focused right now. And I got faith in him. The guys like him, the captains like him, and full steam ahead. Team Bonus.
Right. Yeah, certainly agree. Well, a lot of good stuff hit here today as we kind of wrap it up. I'll give you a second to come up with a number, but do you have a final regular season record in what is the first 82 game season in a year for the Stars prediction?
Man, you put me on the spot here. That's such a hard.
I'll do mine. I figured I did, so I'll do mine. I've got Dallas coming in at a 41, 30, and 11 record, which at the end totals out to 93 points, which I do think will be enough to make the playoffs in the Central. I think that's a modest estimation for this group. I think they'll find themselves somewhere between that 86 and 96 point mark. Obviously, 96 would be on the high end, but when you look at what we've seen the past 2 years, right, they were right around that same total in the COVID shortened season in 20, basically on that projection if it were a full season last year. And then, of course, in 2019, when they almost made it to the conference final, they were right around there as well. So I've got them winning about 40 games.
Yeah, I think you're hitting the nail on the head right there. I think we're going to end up somewhere in that mid 90 total. The words are hard sometimes. Yeah, so somewhere in that overall point total, and that same kind of position where we're kind of fighting for a playoff spot a little bit late, and the optimist in me says that we're gonna make it in this year. So.
Right. I think a lot of fans share that sentiment with you. Have you updated your Twitter handle? Where can fans find you on Twitter?
So it's at Lockdown21, LOCHDOWN 21, and on Instagram, Lockphoto, LOCH.
Oh, there you go. Okay, yeah, follow him and support his photo business for sure, man.
Yeah, come on, you're gonna get all sorts of stars content over there this year. So follow me on Instagram. That's the place to be.
Yeah, very cool.
Twitter's just hot takes over there. You don't want to see that.
Yeah, there you go. That's it. You can follow me on Twitter there at GJones on air. More importantly, follow Dallas Fanatic at Dallas_Fanatic. Keep an eye on our articles and photos all season long. Ryan doing a great job there. DallasSportsFanatic.com is where you can find us. And then this podcast, obviously posting on Spotify, YouTube, basically anywhere that you get podcasts later today. So be sure to keep an eye out for it there. And then always on my personal YouTube page. Ryan, really enjoyed it this afternoon. Looking forward to some Stars Hockey tomorrow.
Yeah, this has been great. Well, I can't wait to get this thing going more regularly than it has been in the past. So let's get this thing going. Hopefully they're winning so we can have a ton of fun this year. Right. Here's to that. Enjoy it, Stars fans. We'll see you back in a few for another episode of the Dallas Stars Fanatic Podcast.